Hello friends, Mandar here. I'm back with another video. Today's topic is, can a H1B holder who is working for a US employer work from outside of the United States? We're going to talk about the immigration aspect, the tax obligations, the legality of the situation, and one more point that I'm going to give that nobody else is talking about, especially in this scenario. So if you are interested in this topic, watch this video until the end and let's get started. If you are here for the first time, welcome. My name is Mandar and I make immigration related videos for US and Canada. I'm not an immigration lawyer, so anything that I say on this video or on my channel is for information purpose only. And for your specific immigration needs, you should hire a competent immigration lawyer. Now with that said, there is a common question that I get from the immigration community, especially people who are on H1B visa working in the United States, that can they work from any location? And particularly some people have asked me, can they work from outside of the United States? Basically going back to their home country, spending relatively significant amount of time with their parents or their relatives and being able to work for the same US employer that they were working on while they were in the United States. So this is a very peculiar situation. As you know, since last year, a lot of employers have allowed their employees to work from home. This is specifically because of the coronavirus. The vaccine is here, but how long is it going to take for everybody to get vaccinated? That is really not known yet. So the question arises, can we work from home indefinitely, especially people who are on H1? So let's look at the immigration aspect of it. So what is an H1B? H1B allows a non-citizen to be sponsored by a US employer to work for them for a specific duration of time at a specific location, in specific skills and under a specific job. There are a lot of restrictions and parameters attached to while you are working on H1B for a US employer. Now this is all specified in the LCA. The LCA is received by the employer when they have specifically identified a location for you, a job profile for you, and a duration for you. Now in this particular scenario, when the employer asks you to work from home for a certain duration of time, it could be extended duration. Now, if it's a shorter duration, say for 30 days or so, you could work from anywhere without having any obligation to change the H1B. It is a very specific time, 30 days, where you are allowed to work from an alternate location other than what is specified in your LCA. But as soon as it goes beyond the alternate job arrangement and goes beyond 30 days at a different location, you need to file an amendment. The amendment should clearly specify your new location and anything else that has materially changed in order for you to be able to work on H1B. Now coming back to the point, working from home, your home has to be located in the same geographical area in a commutable distance to your office location, which is mentioned in your LCA. Usually that distance is around 50 miles. Now in a situation when the employer allows you to work from home, one would argue that they could be located anywhere within the country, within the United States. Now that is true to some extent, but you have to be careful that if you go beyond the commutable distance, technically you need to have an H1B amendment. Now let's talk about people who are asking about whether an H1B holder can work from outside of the United States. Now as you know, since you are allowed to work from home, a lot of people see this as an opportunity to work from anywhere. So they could go back to their home country, live with their parents and relatives and extended family members and be able to work for the same employer while they are in their home country. Now this situation may seem very obvious. It doesn't matter where you are, you can take the calls, you can log in from anywhere and you can do the same work sitting anywhere in the world. So technically, if you are an H1B, you can work from outside of the United States. But here is the thing to consider. It doesn't matter, as soon as you step outside of the United States, you are no longer on H1B. The visa status does not exist. The visa status only exists from the point of entry into the United States to the point when you leave the United States. So it's like a train ticket. You buy a ticket. Unless you board that train and you are traveling, that ticket has no value or it doesn't mean anything. It means only if you use that ticket. Same thing with H1B. You have an approval notice, and if you have a visa stamp and if you come to the United States, then you are actually using the H1. You are technically on H1. Once you go outside of the United States, there is no H1 status technically. Now coming back to the point, can you work for that employer? Yes, you can. So purely from the immigration perspective, you could argue that you are technically allowed to work from outside of the United States. Say for instance, if you are from India, you could spend time in India while still working for the employer as long as the employer allows you to do so. Now here is where the good news ends. Now let's talk about some other things. How is your employer going to pay you? The reason I say this is because if they are going to pay you in your native country salary, in your native country where you are working from, then it doesn't matter. It's employer's headache to have that legal entity present in the country where you are living and working to be able to pay you in that country. But if the employer decides to pay you in the United States, then it is a different story. Now here is where some of the tax obligations come into picture. If you earn an income in the United States, you need to pay taxes on it. Now it's not just the federal income tax, you also have to pay state income tax. Now the state income tax depends on your resident address. So you need to maintain some kind of a US resident address so that that particular state can tax you on your income earned in the United States. You should hire a tax consultant in such scenario to be able to navigate through the tax obligations. Now employer also needs to understand that if they are paying for an employee in a particular state, they need to be doing the payroll tax for that particular state as well. So there are obligations from the employee perspective as well as employer perspective if you are working from outside of the United States but getting a salary in the United States. Now one thing also to consider is if you are getting the salary in your native home country where you are working for the United States employee, you would have the tax obligation within that country as well. Say for instance, you are working from India for a US employer, you will have, and you are getting a salary in India, then you will have the tax obligation in India. Now we talked about immigration, we talked about the taxes. Now let's talk about the legality. Now legally, can an employer hire a person from around the world? There is no such law that prevents the employer from doing so. So legally that is possible. Now here is the last thing that I really wanted to emphasize on. Now since the pandemic, a lot of people have been working from home. So a lot of people have an assumption that you can just leave the country and continue to work from anywhere in the world without even letting the employer know. Or even if the employer knows, it is okay to do so. Now here is some caution. Now these are few other important things that you need to understand. One is company policy. Certain employers are government regulated, such as financial companies, utilities, oil and gas, and some regulated companies such as insurance companies and so on. They may have company policy as per the federal law that you need to reside in the country to be able to continue the work for that company. So this might not be just a company policy, but this might be a regulated policy that you need to find out if your company would allow to do so. If you ignore that policy and if you don't tell your employer that you are working from outside of the United States because you are working remotely on the video calls, you might assume that the employer may not find out. But if that's what you're doing, you need to be very careful. Is there a company policy or is there a regulated policy for the company to have your employees in the same state or in the same country where the company operates? It is very important to find that out. If not, you might get into trouble and the company may even fire you for violating their policy. Now there is another thing called data sovereignty. Now a lot of companies have data that is proprietary data. There is something called data sovereignty. What it means is if the data is confidential and if it is an intellectual property and if it was created and maintained within the United States, then US needs to have control on it. It needs to reside in the United States and any access from outside of the United States might be prohibited. So in this particular situation where you are working for a company that has highly confidential data or private data or something called or something that falls into data sovereignty laws, you might want to be very careful accessing that data from outside of the United States. It can land you into hot water if you don't take this seriously. So this is the fifth point that I really wanted to emphasize. Know your company, know your company's business, know your company's policy. find out if there is a data sovereignty law that would prevent you from taking your work laptop to a country where it might not be allowed to access the data from. It is very important, and I know some people who have got into trouble because of this. So just because the company is allowing you to work from home or from a remote location, especially for the H1B, doesn't mean that you are free to go anywhere in the world and just work from anywhere. There is immigration consequence that I told, there is a tax obligation, there is legal obligation, and this final one, which is company regulatory or data sovereignty problem. So I hope that makes sense. So the simple answer to the question, can a H1B person work from outside of the United States? The answer is yes, but there are a lot of things that you need to consider, otherwise it can get you into trouble. So I hope this video was useful for you. If it was, please give a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel, and I'll see you in the next one.